You are listening to the new man, beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Can you really learn how to become world-class at something you failed at just months ago? Does your fear of missing out keep you stuck in painful dilemmas? And what's the key to making anything you do truly satisfying? 4-Hour Emperor Tim Ferriss is here to tell us about fear, saying no, learning, and how he turned his dismal failures into success. Welcome to The New Man. Today we're talking with Tim Ferriss. He's the author of The 4-Hour Workweek, The 4-Hour Body, and most recently, The 4-Hour Chef. Tim, thanks for being on the show and talking today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I got to admit, I fell into the trap. I judged a book by its cover before I got a copy. And I was like, well, okay, now he's writing a cookbook here. It's just going to be about cooking. But it's way, way, way more than that. I'll just throw it to you this way. Why should a guy care about this book? I mean, what's in it for him if cooking's not his thing? It's not on his radar.
Yeah, it's a good question, especially to a lifelong non-cook. My second most popular YouTube video of all time is one of me cooking liquid egg whites in plastic containers for breakfast.
Won't that make you sterile? I think that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that does make you sterile. So I'm glad I stopped doing that once I got the comments on the video. But so guys who don't care about cooking should care about this book because it's a guide to accelerated learning and tackling anything in record time, like learning languages in 8 weeks, shooting a 3-pointer in basketball for the first time in a weekend, learning to swim like an Olympian, whatever it might be, disguised as a cookbook. Because my readers have been asking me for 4 or 5 years to write a book on learning, on like the 4-Hour Mind or something like that. Yeah. And the problem is when you talk about learning in the abstract, like this is how one learns a skill. It's really boring. This is really my third obsession, right? So you have the business stuff, the lifestyle stuff, then you have the body related stuff, and now the learning. And this is really like my third and kind of final major obsession. I wanted to, much like Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, use my journeys in the cooking world and overcoming my fear of cooking and tackling all these different facets of it as a vehicle for exploring all of the most advanced tools for accelerated learning. And that's pretty much it. I would say one more thing, though, specific to men, and this is something I haven't gotten into before. I realized about 1.5 years ago that I was basically a manual illiterate. What I mean by that is, I could use my hands for a keyboard. I could do a lot in the digital world, but unlike my dad, I couldn't repair basic home electronics. I couldn't fix most things on a car. I couldn't find my way without a GPS or an iPhone or something. Huh. And I really felt like I'd lost some of my humanness in that sense. And so I wanted to do woodworking as a way to start to create things, to build things with my hands. It was just too inconvenient. I didn't want to have a shitty birdhouse in my living room. And so and around that time, I started watching my girlfriend cook, who taught herself to cook by watching her grandmother, and I just became fascinated by it. And so cooking became my way for reclaiming my humanness, using my hands to build things. And I think that is something that sounds maybe kind of out there, but it is the impact that has had on my life has been just incredible. So it's a combination of those two things.
I love that because so much of our lives can be ideas and strategizing. And when I talk to guys, they were all about plans and this is what I'm going to, I could imagine happening. I can get it all in my head. Yeah. Oh, but implementing it? Oh, well, wait a second. That's a whole different thing. And so this embodiment piece is, I don't know, to me, that's the rich area. That's where we actually get the sensations and we get to feel it and I'm alive. I'm doing this.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's why, the subtitle, which sounds like ridiculously expansive, which is, the simple path to cooking like a pro, learning anything and living the good life. The living the good life is closely related to that last piece that we talked about, and really reconnecting with ingredients. And even if you never cook anything in the book, what it will do is it will increase your enjoyment of eating like 10 to 100 fold. Because instead of seeing things like I did in kind of black and white, where it was hot, cold, good, bad, spicy, not spicy, I mean, you're going to be able to pick out all of these million colors as you eat. So I think that for the sole purpose of just enjoying something 10 times more that you do 3 times a day anyway, another good reason to pick this thing up.
I love it. This is a conversation I have with guys a lot. It's like, hey, I want to find my passion. I want to be more passionate in my life. Well, that's a feeling. That's a sensation that we have. And most of us are just shoveling shit into our mouths and eating it, or we're kind of mowing through mindlessly, paying it, like email in one hand, TV on over here. And we're not really actually enjoying or taking in the experiences that are around us. And so what you're saying here is you're going to actually learn how to slow down, have an experience. And that's that's the good life. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, the whole book is a Trojan horse, right? So for people who have followed my stuff, they may know that I'm extremely fond of the Stoic school of philosophy, and Seneca in particular. Very fascinated with sort of reconnecting with the physical world now. Very interested in that, and endlessly obsessed with learning. Right. So it's like, how do you wrap all those things into one? And the way you do that is by exploring cooking. And the book is broken into 5 sections. The first is, there's the meta learning section, which kind of goes, and I don't expect anyone to read, much like the 4-Hour Body. It's kind of a choose your own adventure book. So people will read, 100 and 150 pages and then dip into it as they explore new things, hopefully for a long time. And the book has meta learning first, teaches you all the most advanced stuff that I know. Then domestic, which basically compresses all of the most versatile and powerful techniques and skills of culinary school, 2-year culinary school, into 4 hours of total prep time. So like 15 meals that take less than 15 minutes each to make, which was a huge pain in the ass to figure out how to do that, because I've just never seen it done anywhere. And then that's cooking twice a week for 2 months, right? Super, super easy. And then the wild section is becoming not only self-sufficient, but self-reliant. And that entails like really getting outside and like looking at foraging, looking at survival, looking at hunting when need be, and how to go through that entire process. And like, for instance, this book would perfectly prepare someone to deal with like the hurricane in New York or Katrina or anything like that. Mm-hmm. That's the wild section. Then the scientist, which gets into all the kind of Willy Wonka crazy shit that I think is fascinating, as well as the biochemical tricks that people liked from the 4-Hour Body. So it's like, how do you eat a 15,000 calorie Vermonster, which is from Ben & Jerry's, this disgusting bucket of ice cream with hot fudge and bananas and cookies and all that crap. How do you eat that in 20 minutes? Then the next day, do a food marathon, which is 26.2 dishes in 26 locations in 24 hours, which is like another 15,000 calories. And then clock in with lower body fat the last day than before doing the first, which is kind of fun to figure that out. And then the last is the professional, which is just looking at how to borrow creativity and creative methods from the world's best chefs and apply it to everything that you do.
Okay. All right. You talked about, reducing or condensing the culinary school into I can't remember how long you said, but we're going to basically break it down, this whole concept of accelerated learning. And so we've had guys come on this show and talk about the whole 10,000 hours thing. You become a master by putting in your 10,000 hours. And you're very bold and you say you can become world class in just about anything in 6 months or less. So how do you cut time without cutting corners?
Yep, absolutely. So I think that what's really important when you're talking to anyone or debating anything, like so people will get into a debate about what it takes to be happy, right, or what it takes to be successful, and when those words aren't defined very well, it gets really confusing, and people end up arguing in like an endless loop.
Right.
Just like, do you believe in God? Well, like before we even have that conversation, like let's define God, right?
Right.
And similarly, I think becoming world class, we need to define world class really carefully. So for me, it's the top 5% in the world. That's it. Like general population, out of all the people on the planet, you're top 5% at a given skill, which is absolutely, on that basis, I think world class. It's not necessarily becoming Tiger Woods, who, when he was like 7 years old, was drawing pictures of different irons hitting golf balls and not pirate ships, which you're going to be Tiger Woods. You know it pretty early on. Mm-hmm. Now, the way that you cut time without cutting corners is by looking for the anomalies. And this is where things can get lost. So my specialty is seeking out the outliers and anomalies and then trying to model them. So for instance, averages and patterns in averages can be really misleading. So if Bill Gates walks into a bar, the average net worth of each person in there jumps to $500 million. But of course, that's really misleading. So what I would prefer to do is model Bill Gates and not look at the averages. So there are many different examples. And so along my adventures, it's like you find somebody who learned Icelandic well enough in 7 days to go on a TV show and be interviewed. You know, how did he do that? Okay. Is it some unique skill or can you model it? You meet someone like Shinji Takeuchi, who learned how to swim when he was, 30 or 35, but has the second most viewed YouTube clip on swimming because of his incredible technique. So it's like, how did he go from zero to that? And what was his training method? It turns out it was totally like the opposite of, let's say, a Michael Phelps. And I think that by studying the anomalies and then asking them or asking yourself a few questions about what they've done, you can really quickly try to figure out at least a hypothesis for like, this is what I think their recipe is. This is what I think their blueprint was or is. And then you test it. And as you do so, you'll be able to pick out, through 80-20 analysis, which is, of course, sort of a common thread through the 4-hour work week, the 4-hour body. You're finding the 20% of activities that produce 80% of the results, or identifying, let's say in swimming, the 20% of the movements that create 80% of the forward motion. It's not kicking. For instance, people think it's like kicking like a bat out of hell. And that's why a lot of people quit swimming. The only way that I learned to swim, which was a few years ago, in fact, was by completely rethinking the biomechanics and studying a method called total immersion, where you basically don't kick. It's incredible. It goes on and on. But I think doing the 80-20 analysis, so much like, let's say, Toyota manufacturing, you can find elegance in what seems chaotic. So lean manufacturing with Toyota was really based on, among other things, removing as many steps as possible. And that wasn't a shortcut. It was an elegant move to remove waste. So I think those are a few of the ways that you can look at it.
Okay. One of the things that I get there is that when we look at a Tiger Woods or we look at a Phelps or something like that, I think something closes down in a guy's eyes. He's like, I got to be like them. Therefore, I got to do what they do. There's no way I'm going to do what they did. But there's something about this where you scale it back and say, no. What's good enough but still really good? And starting to find ways where you don't have to be that freak out there and do what the freak did, the anomaly, as you said. I don't know. It just gets rid of the perfectionism, gets rid of this really ultra way out there, trying to compare yourself to a Bill Gates or a Phelps or a Tiger Woods or something. And it starts to become more manageable and more doable. I just realized like the bar of entry now gets a lot lower. Is that kind of what you're saying too?
Well, it gets lower in a sense, but I still think you can be, ridiculously good at many things. And that's what I try to impart to people is like, okay, people see these things that I've done, like, the world record in tango and, national kickboxing champ and all these different things and 25 languages and so forth. What they don't realize is that I failed at all of those things up until about age 16. And then many of them, tango and all, like half of my bio, 3/4 of my bio is all from like 3 years ago onward or 4 years ago onward. And it's because I figured out through trial and error a better blueprint for approaching these skills. And what's exciting about that is that you, rather than believing a very limiting belief, which is like you become world class in anything takes a lifetime. So you can really only focus on becoming a specialist, really good at one or two things in your life, to my standpoint, which is you can do one or two per year if you set your mind to it. And that is really, that just changes the lens through which you view everything in the world. And the last point I would make is that yeah, I don't think it's impossible for people to become as good as a lot of these professionals. Certainly, there's some genetic limitations in certain cases, but if you look at, let's say, some of the best NFL players, it's very easy to look at someone and say they are who they are because of how they train, because of how they eat. But in many cases, those people are who they are despite how they train, despite how they eat. Like, you go to the NFL, I kid you not, you see some of these guys who have like 5% body fat, running backs and stuff. I know some of these guys, and they eat McDonald's for breakfast, Wendy's for lunch, Burger King for dinner. I mean, it's just pure garbage. And so you need to pick the people you emulate really carefully. But it's a fascinating journey. It's really fun, and it's obviously one that I'm still continuing.
Let's dive into the limiting beliefs, because there are guys out there that have the 5% body fat and they could be in the NFL, but there's something going on screwy between their ears. There's something that they don't believe in themselves. And I'm wondering, for the guy that wants to become the chef, or he wants to become the leader in his own life, what's the mindset that they need to adopt? And I don't know if this is going to, you maybe swimming in this water, you're like, I don't realize you need a different mindset. But when you're out there and you're talking to people, like, that guy has a mindset where he can do anything in his life, that guy doesn't. Are you able to see the two different mindsets there?
Sometimes you do. But like, as a personal example, the swimming, I mean, I grew up on Long Island, practically on the beach, and couldn't swim because I had a couple of near drowning experiences and I took swimming lessons, could never get it. Was always kind of like a dense little wrestler, meat cube. So I would just sink. And so I just concluded, like, I can't swim. Like, I can't swim because I'm too dense. I can't swim because I was born premature and have lung issues. I can't swim because fill in the blank. And I just carried that with me, and I accepted this like partial completeness for like, okay, I just can't swim. That's okay. I'll focus on other things. And like basketball, I was ridiculed in junior high at one point when I was trying to learn how to play basketball. And the coach at the time was like, you dribble like a caveman. That's really funny. And I was just like, fuck, I was like in front of the whole, junior varsity squad. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'm not going to do it then. And I quit. And I was like, I can't play basketball. I'm like a caveman. It's okay. I'm good at wrestling. I'm bad at basketball. That's the way it is. Bullshit, and what it took in all these cases were a couple of little, cracks in the universe where I saw the potential to learn those things. And one of them was, a buddy for the swimming piece, a good friend of mine who's a good swimmer. He said, all right, man, look, I'm going to give you your New Year's resolution. I was like, okay. He said, you need to swim an open water 1 kilometer race in swimming by the end of the year. And you can give me my New Year's resolution in exchange, and we both have to do it. I was like, okay, great. And this is a guy who's doing like 6 to 8 double espressos a day. I said, you can't have anything stronger than green tea for the rest of the year. No stimulants, no coffee, no espresso. And he's like, okay, you're on. Great. And so then I had stakes, and I actually, found total immersion through a separate friend of mine, and learned how to swim because I had the stakes. And I was like, well, if this thing I thought was impossible for 30 years wasn't impossible at all, like, what else out there isn't impossible that I thought was impossible? So basketball, also complete happenstance. A buddy of mine named Nivi, who's a really good investor in Silicon Valley, sort of accumulates weird skills like me. And we were having dinner at a Japanese restaurant, and I told him, like, yeah, basketball, one of those things, like I can just never do it. And he said, well, if you want to deconstruct basketball, you need to look up this guy named Rick Torbett. I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I still didn't accept it. I was like, yeah, nah, I'm okay. Like, I'll get back to you. And it wasn't until maybe a year later that decided to look it up as part of this book, the 4-Hour Chef, where I really wanted to take the skills that I most feared and the skills I had failed at, like cooking, like basketball, and try to tackle them and then explain to people how I went about it. And like, boom, now I enjoy going to, I never would have imagined in a million years I'd be like, yeah, let's go to the YMCA and like shoot some hoops. Like, you got to be fucking kidding me, And I find it super relaxing now. It's just odd. It's really, really odd. But I think that I do think that you take action and then develop confidence, not the other way around. So a lot of people think that I just walk around believing I can do everything and anything. It's not true. It's not true. Like, I have all I have insecurities like everyone else. I have a lot of fears like everyone else. But what I think I'm very good at is bracing myself for potential failure and saying, you know what, fuck it. You're not going to know unless you give it a shot. And what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm very good at that kind of practical pessimism where I'm like, honestly, what's the worst thing that can happen? What? I go to the YMCA and I shoot some air balls. Like, who cares? Like, I'll go earlier, I'll go late, and I'll try to minimize my embarrassment. Like, what is the worst that can happen? And I'm good at then just trying stuff. That's it. I'm just good at trying it, like for a week. I'm going to try this for a week. Like, short trials is kind of how I run my life.
I like that a lot. I like that. Especially love that part of like where confidence is a result of experience, or confidence is a result of you taking action. A lot of us are thinking, well, when I feel up to it, then I'll go try. And that's where we just stay stuck. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Mike Tyson at his prime was still so nervous before his fights that he would often puke in the bathroom. Mike Tyson,
lay your ass out on the mat, Mike Tyson.
I mean, like Mike Tyson at his prime, most dominant boxer in the last 50 years, was still terrified when he went out. And there's actually a great documentary called Tyson that goes through this. But he was terrified. That's Tyson, and his coach, Customato, would say, the hero and the coward feel the same thing. It's how the hero acts that makes him different. And I think that's true. Like if you're fearless, you're nuts. You're insane. Like humans are designed to feel fear. It keeps them alive,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I think we think, well, if I'm feeling fear or if I'm feeling discomfort, a lot of guys aren't even aware that it's fear. They're just like, this just doesn't feel right to me. It's like that something's wrong, that something's off, that I shouldn't be doing this. And what you're saying is like, no, expect fear to show up. That's normal. Now, what's your response going to be?
Yeah, exactly. And I think fear often tells you exactly what you need to be doing. And obviously there's like fear, I need to avoid X, but then there's fear like that makes me uncomfortable, therefore something needs fixing, Yeah. Or let me dig a little bit deeper. Like, let me look under the surface. Like, why am I afraid of my inbox? Like, what's going on there? And like the head in the sand approach is probably not going to fix it. So, what's actually going on? And, when people ask me, which happens a lot, like, because I said, look, tackle your most important 1 or 2 to-dos before you check your email in the morning. Like, put aside an hour, wake up an hour earlier if you have to, and focus on your 1 or 2 most important to-dos before email. So people will ask, like, well, how do I know what my most important to-dos are? And I said 9 times out of 10, it's whatever you're avoiding doing. It's the most, whatever makes you most uncomfortable on your to-do list is probably the most important thing.
and I've found guys that'll do, I'm going to just be honest, it's me. Okay. I'll do the 20 or 30 things that I, just to be busy and try to feel like I'm getting shit done, when I'm avoiding the 1 or 2 things that if I just did those, I'd actually feel like my day was complete and I did what I needed to do. So we go to bed feeling exhausted and worn out, but we don't feel any satisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about fear for a second. You talked about fear and simplification. One of the things that guys get where they get stymied is this loss aversion, and more importantly, the fear of missing out. So they don't fully commit to one thing. They're going to have like 3 or 4 options that are rolling out there. So you had a picture in your book of the blade above your door. It says simplify. Let's talk about simplification. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to a lot of others. So how do you commit fully to that one thing?
With great difficulty. It's really simple, but very difficult. You know what I mean? As many things are. And I have come to realize a few things, and this is an ongoing challenge. It's not like, but it's a conquerable challenge.
Yeah.
I don't want to give people the illusion, which I think a lot of sort of positive pop psychology gives them, which is like, you just decide this once and then you're done. Like, okay, I'm going to simplify, great, and then your life is simple for the rest of your life. It's not how it works. But a few things. Number one is that saying no to the little manufactured emergencies is necessary if you want to get anything big done. Number one.
And what do you mean by the manufactured emergencies?
I need to hear back from you today on this. Like the people who send you like 5 follow-up emails, even though there's no rush, all that kind of crap that makes your cortisol levels shoot through the roof.
Right.
And you feel like you have to attend to whatever is peeking out at you at the top of your inbox, as opposed to saying, look, I need to block out 2-3 hours of time to actually get this milestone accomplished in my most important to do, even if the other things fall to pieces. Like for instance, like that DVD, or this is a little dated perhaps, but like that, that DVD that needs to get back, or that Netflix that needs to get back, or that even like that parking ticket that needs to get paid. And like, you can use all of those things to put off the important things. And it's like, you know what? Fine. Have a $10 penalty on that parking ticket, let it go, like block out the 2 to 3 hours. And there are a couple of authors who've written really well on this. One of them's not an author at all. His name's Paul Graham. He's one of the founders of Y Combinator, which is the most successful startup incubator in Silicon Valley. And he wrote a piece online. You can find it, essay called something like the maker versus the manager schedule.
Okay.
And along the same lines, Peter Drucker has a fantastic book with a very boring title called The Effective Executive. And the gist of it is, no collection of 20-minute chunks of time will ever equal one block of 2 or 3 hours in terms of productivity. So the first thing you have to do in order to focus and simplify is to have the time to focus and simplify. But in terms of choosing your opportunities and picking your shots, you need to develop a set of rules for yourself. So it's like, if you're feeling overwhelmed, for instance, I'll give a personal example. There was a point when the 4-Hour Workweek came out, it's turned down by 26 publishers, comes out, surprise hit of the decade, according to Men's Journal, blah, 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 right? And I start getting all these speaking inquiries. People want me to do speaking gigs. And they're paid speaking gigs. And I was so flattered and amazed that anyone would pay me to speak that I said yes to everything. And I paid the price 6 months later when they all actually happened. And I was just like a traveling salesman for 2 months. It was the fucking worst. Like just going from like spot to spot to spot, doing the same talk or some variation of it. It was horrible. It was like Up in the Air with Clooney. It was just so depressing. And even after that point, because these deals were seemingly very lucrative, and I guess they were lucrative, but I was negotiating all these one-offs, so it's like every deal was a different deal. Everybody tried to haggle. Everybody wanted to negotiate. Even if I had my assistant do it, it was really, really time consuming. And then one of my buddies who also has written books and has done well said to me, you know how I simplified that? And I said, no. He goes, well, there are 2 ways. The first is I either do the free stuff, which is where the audiences are so amazing, the events are so incredible that they don't have to pay anyone. I do either the free stuff or I do full retail, like nothing in between. I don't do any haggling. It's either full price, like extremely expensive for me to speak, or it's free, nothing in between. I was like, very binary, right?
Yeah.
And then he said, secondly, for the full retail, and this is actually what Seth Godin does too, the further away it is from my house, the more expensive it is. So that's it. So it's like, it's down the street and I can like wander over during lunch break and do a little presentation and come back, and great, it's one price. If I have to fly across the country, it's twice that price. If I have to go overseas, it's 3 times that price. And then the hard part, which is following your own rules, I've been very good at following my own rules with speaking, but I have not been as good at following my own rules with startups, for instance, and startup investing and advising. And I've been very fortunate to have an incredible portfolio of startups that I work with and advise and have advised from the very beginning. I mean, a lot of whether it's Twitter, Uber, StumbleUpon, Evernote. I work really closely with some of these companies, but I end up saying yes to too much because there are too many interesting things. And so you can end up in this embarrassment of riches situation. And I'm not complaining, but
right.
It's where you're not choosing between like bad opportunity, good opportunity, which is easy on some level. which is where I was a few years ago, you're like, wow, I have 10 interesting opportunities I could go after, or 10 interests I could go after. How do I choose one? And the answer is you freaking flip a coin, roll the dice, you pick one, and you try it. That's the answer.
And you got to deal with that doubt, like, oh, did I do the right thing? But you just still march through it. You keep going. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way that, and I think the way you do that is you have confidence in your ability to create opportunity. That's it. So the way people get in trouble with, let's say, investing, in startups at least, is they feel like they're going to miss the boat on the big opportunity. So like the startup comes through, oh my God, like I've already hit my quota and I've used X% of my income for investing, but now there's this new amazing opportunity. I can't miss it. I can't miss it. That's how you make really bad decisions and lose a lot of money.
It's kind of a panic, right? It's this sense that this is the only time, this is the only thing that'll ever come up versus I trust other opportunities are going to show up.
Right. But that's also how, let's say, entrepreneurs make bad decisions about clients. So they're like, okay, I'm deciding I'm going, super high end. I want a handful of low maintenance, high profit customers. And then they have somebody come in who could take a dent out of their rent check, let's say. And it doesn't fit that profile. It's a high headache, high profit customer. And they're like, well, I'll get to my new model, but in the meantime, like this will take care of half of my rent, so I'm going to do it. Rather than saying, I can push through, I can still pay my rent, it'll be a little bit more painful, but I'm going to stick to my guns and trust in my ability to generate better opportunities or as good opportunities later.
It seems like when we don't trust ourselves and when we don't trust that we're valuable, we tend to put out the message out there that, hey, I don't really think I'm that valuable, so you shouldn't either. You ever notice that?
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. And I mean, it's, as in, I think, any human relationship, and honestly, I mean, if you look at apes and monkeys, the same exact thing. I mean, as soon as someone shows any sign of weakness in the form of desperation or anxiety about rushing or anything like that, you will be taken advantage of. It's just that is how human nature functions. So if the first rule of negotiation, when I was taught this a few years ago, I was like, my God, like that makes so much sense. It sounds kind of depressing, but it's true. Like he who cares less wins. End of story. You know what I mean? Like if you're willing to walk away, you win. And it's like if you are so sort of dependent on, let's say, your partner in a romantic relationship where you have no self-worth unless they're constantly giving you validation, you lose. Like you lose. And it's not that you want to be cold to your partner. That's not what I'm saying. But you need to be very self-sufficient and strong on your own 2 feet. And if you constantly require some type of validation that you can only acquire through constantly compromising with, let's say, clients or whomever it might be, then you're going to be taken advantage of. And so I think that it's very important to sort of know your stakes, know what your betting limits are, and know what your quitting time is, and know what your walkaways are in most situations. And it doesn't take a lot of time to think about it. It takes maybe a minute before you get on the phone to talk to someone. But really, being willing to say no is a major skill.
And it forces you to, what you're talking about, just having that preparation forces us to actually realize, what am I a yes to? What is it that I'm wanting? Instead of what am I fearful of losing? Yeah. And I can imagine, this helps me, but just to go into a situation, and sometimes it's maybe's a no. What am I a full yes to? I'm going to play to what I'm a full yes to. If it's maybe sort of kind of iffy, well, I don't know. What do you think? No, let it go and just trust that the best stuff will come through, and that's the best use of your time, energy, and money.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you brought up a great point. And one of my buddies who I really admire tremendously, his name is Derek Sivers, and Derek Sivers founded CD Baby, which is basically the largest retailer of independent music, indie music in the world. It was at one point, at least, and sold his company for I don't know what it was, $29 million or whatever it was, and very grounded philosophically, an incredible programmer, just a fascinating guy. And like to overcome his shyness, to give you an idea, to overcome his shyness at one point, he became, not kidding you, the ringleader, like MC in a circus. He did like 1,000 appearances. I'm not kidding. It's fucking amazing. And one of his rules, and he has a very good kind of operating system for living the good life and being an effective entrepreneur. And one of his rules is like, it has to be, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. So it's like when you're evaluating opportunities, if it's not like, fuck yeah, I totally want to do that, it's a no. So if it's like you said, that lukewarm, like, it's not bad, that could be interesting, like ping me again in a month.
Right.
You're better off just saying no and saving everybody a lot of time and bandwidth and headache, you know?
Yeah. And that would require that trust.
Yeah, and I think it's the lukewarm yeses, and this is speaking personally too. It's like there are cases where I have like 2 or 3 friends who are like, "Man, you have to do this. Such a good opportunity. Meet this guy. Let me make the introduction." And then I'm like, I just can't get really excited about it.
Right.
And I don't want to be rude, but if to avoid seeming rude, I say yes to everything, my life will be in shambles. You know, I can't do that. So it's it's a constant course correction, I think.
I like that you brought that up, because I think there are guys that listen to this show, whether we've had Derek on, whether it's been Derek or you or anyone, and they get in their mind that there's some kind of exoneration, that there's some point that when you make a certain amount or you have a certain amount of success, that you're exonerated from this prison of suffering, like, you know, that you don't have any more difficult choices to come up against. And I like that you're speaking about this, that they keep coming. You you have a whole new set of problems that, you know, it's like a video game. You clear the board and then the monsters get faster, and it's like it just keeps going, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Once you clear level, man, it doesn't get easier. You just have a new set of problems, and that doesn't need to be depressing. And I think that, you know, without challenges, you would actually be much more depressed than if you didn't have those challenges. And if you look at any of the ultra rich people out there, particularly, well, I would say primarily those who were born into extreme affluence, they are fucking miserable. They're so miserable. And it's not always the case, but it's very, very, very frequently the case. And it's because they don't have any giants to slay. You know, they don't have any mountains to summit. They're just like, I'm unemployed, but I'm going to call myself a painter, and I don't know what to do with myself, so I'm going to go to my shrink and get my antidepressants. And it's a bad existence. So, you clear level, you have bigger, different problems. And it's like, so it should be, you know, it's like if you have the wherewithal to conquer one level, like, guess what? You've earned the right to have different problems.
Yeah, I think so. And you know, if you're steering this ship and you're saying, look, what kind of problems do I want to have, or what kind of challenges do I want to have, then it's fun. I mean, you sat down in front of the video game, you chose to turn it on and play. Why not bring that same mentality to your life? But there's a lot of people that are playing, they're like, I just want to be done. I don't want to have to deal with this shit anymore. And that's where that's the suffering.
Yeah, that's a dangerous game. And I mean, I think that a good objective to have certainly is the ability to say no and opt out whenever you want. I think that is an absolutely worthwhile goal. But you're not going to opt out forever. Most people won't, because they'll be too bored. But in my case, like, look, I'm going to take all of February off. I'm going to go off the grid, right? And I have the ability to do that. And I think that is something that you can earn and create. Mostly from all the stuff in the 4-hour work week. But part of the way that I personally can tolerate and feed off of the problems and the suffering that comes with striving to do anything incredible, it doesn't have to be a lot of suffering, but it's there, is having a goal to impact other people. Like, just if it's only for you, it's not going to be enough. Like, it's just not. At some point, you will run out of hit points. But if you're like, look, I'm doing this for the betterment of X, and it's something outside of yourself. Could be your kids, could be the broader world, could be for your listeners, could be for your readers, could be for your community, could be for your church, could be for anything. But having that, I think, really gives meaning to an otherwise pretty shallow driven experience.
Oh, I like that, because, a lot of the things that you're talking about in your past that you've done, whether it was, ballroom dance or tango or writing or kickboxing, they were very solitary. It was you and you got the award and that was it. Did you learn that through, wait a second, what's really most rewarding? Did that come through writing? How did you learn that lesson?
Well, I always wanted to teach, and I simply found that instead of being in a classroom, and I still teach, I go back to Princeton twice a year and I teach a guest lecture in high-tech entrepreneurship, which is a blast. I mean, it's really, really fun. But I just found, again, in this accidental career that I've chanced upon in a way, that books and the blog are the highest leverage form of teaching that I can do. And it's just been so rewarding. I mean, I'm really excited to see what this book does. But, to meet people who have lost 150 pounds, 170 pounds on this low carb diet from the 4-Hour Body, right? In many cases with no exercise, just like pure diet, boom, 170 pounds. And to meet people who are like, my mom is off of insulin now, and we expect her to have like an additional 10 to 20 years in her life. So she'll get to actually see her grandkids. Or
that's awesome.
Whatever it is, I was trapped in this job with miscellaneous, like monolithic corporate behemoth, and like now I run my own business and I can take 2 months off a year with my kids and travel and so forth and so on. Like, so for this book, it's like I want people to come up to me after reading The 4-Hour Chef and be like, you know what, I was always afraid of swimming, or I never thought I could ever learn a language, or I never thought I could do X, like fill in the blank. I'd never cooked in my life, and I just made like ossobuco for a family or for like a group dinner of 4, and it took me 5 minutes of prep time, and everyone thought it was, I should open my own restaurant or whatever it is. I want people to come up to me when they see me and say that kind of thing. And that's where that's the fuel for the fire that keeps me doing this stuff. Because books are really, really, really hard. Like writing is very difficult for me. And it's that kind of feedback that keeps me going. But if I were just doing all of these experiments for myself and not putting them down and sharing them with people, I would not be able to get through it. I just wouldn't be able to.
It wouldn't have the juice.
It wouldn't have the juice.
Yeah. What are the daily fundamental practices that you do to get you into this mindset? What are the things that you can't leave behind, even if you go off the grid? What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis? I got to do this.
It depends very much on the time. So I'm very project oriented. I don't have necessarily. We're talking about work specific things.
Well, I think more of just your own prep, like to prep you for the day. Some guys are all about, I got to get my movement in. I got to do my meditation. I got to eat my shake that's got an antler horn in it, whatever. It's like, what's your thing? Right.
Yeah. So I go on and off with certain things, like the meditation I'm fairly inconsistent with, but I'll do it on and off. The most consistent routine that I have is wake up, 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. So pretty much immediately I'll have a protein shake or a fast breakfast. If I have a whole food breakfast, it's going to be 2 to 3 eggs with some nice spices in them, spinach, and then lentils. Typically, that's like the magical breakfast for a host of reasons if I do a whole food breakfast. Okay. Otherwise, I'll have a shake, and then I'll put a kettle on for hot water, and I'll have pu'er tea. That's my most current tea favorite for mornings is pu'er tea, which has some interesting fat loss applications, but it also lights you up like a Christmas tree, which is helpful. And then I'll really try to focus on the most important 1 or 2 to-dos. Those could be personal, those could be business related, before jumping into email right away, so that I don't feel like I'm stepping right into high speed traffic. You know what I mean? Which is what happens if you jump right into reactive mode with email. Right now this is book launch, so it's a very unique period of time for me. This is like my final sprint in the gold medal race for the Olympics, right? Very unusual time for me, but I try to look at different opportunities. Then, if my objective, let's just say, is to move 100,000 copies of the book in week 1, and since the book is Amazon Publishing's first major acquisition is being boycotted by 600 plus stores of Barnes and Noble and so forth, I have a challenge ahead of me. So it's like, how do I make up for that deficit online and elsewhere? Well, I need to look at different partnerships and whatnot and sort of look at them in descending order of potential max volume of books moved, and then look at the next actions and milestones for each of those relationships whether pre-existing or relationships I need to develop, and then work down the list, focusing on the highest leverage, highest impact options first. And then later on in the day, self-care, super important. So I because of the amount of time I'm spending seated these days, I will either go to the gym and do some type of posterior chain work. What that means is just like deadlifts, kettlebell swings, base of the skull to Achilles tendons type of posterior work. To correct a lot of the imbalances. Since I'm sitting down with a keyboard, I'll work on pec mobility. So really opening up the pec tissue so it doesn't get constrained and affect my posture. And then perhaps once or twice a week, I'll get actual massage work done because it's really therapeutic. And it's at this point for me, because of the amount that I'm trying to get done right now. I mean, it's really like swapping out the tires on a Formula One race car. Like if you don't do that, you're going to crash and burn in a major way. And they might only be 30 minutes long. Like they're not 3-hour massages, and that's something that for anyone who makes, even $40,000 a year, like you can afford to get a 30-minute massage once a week. Like it's not out of the question.
I love that aspect of recovery and all this, because it's easy to just look at all the output. I got to output, but you're talking about this self-recovery. A lot of guys have a hard time giving themselves permission to do that, and they see it as somehow working against it. I like that you're making this case like, no, without this, I don't get to be effective.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's no question. I mean, without the repair, like, business and life are full contact sports. So it's like you go out there and you take a bunch of, blade swipes, you take a bunch of fastballs to the chest. Like you need to have a timeout to recover before you can go out and do that again. You can't simply, have your nose to the grindstone for the entire period of time. Like you will not survive, let alone thrive. And it'll certainly negatively affect not only you, but your relationship. So the recovery is a must-have for optimal performance.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned what's going on with the book and how it's being boycotted. Barnes & Noble, you've got a very special offer for the people listening right now. Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah,
absolutely. So the book is The 4-Hour Chef is by far the most beautiful book I've ever put together. I mean, it has 1,500 plus photos, it's had hundreds of illustrations, worked with teams around the world to put this thing together right. And it's kind of like choose your own adventure book meets comic book meets coffee table book. It's a lot of fun. So this is it's a great holiday book. And so what I'm offering is an exclusive Q&A with me where you can ask me whatever you want, which we'll do after the launch week. And to get an invite to that, the proper link and whatnot, all you have to do, if you're interested, is buy 3 copies of the print book on Amazon, and then send the receipt for those 3 books to the following email address: 3 books, the number 3 books at 4-Hour Chef, the number 4, and then HOURCHEF.com. And you'll get an invite. So that's that simple. So if you buy 3 books, 3 print books, 1 for you, 2 as gifts, and send the Amazon email receipt to 3 books at 4hourchef.com, you'll get an invite, and then I'll pop a bottle of wine and we'll hang out for an hour or 2, and you can ask me whatever you want.
It's awesome, man. We've never had that offer on here. So very, very cool. Hey, Tim Ferriss, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. Great stuff. We went way over. I appreciate your generosity. There was so much good stuff in here. I think this will be one of those interviews that guys go back to over and over again and pull out some great nuggets.
This was really fun. So thanks for having me. And I hope people enjoyed it. Great job. You're a very good interviewer.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.